Hello everybody, my name is Kat Bowser. I'm your resident fantasy therapist and welcome back to my channel. Those of you who are returning, welcome back. Those of you who are here for the first time, welcome. My name is Kat Bowser. I am a licensed therapist and I'm also an author working on my first novel. So on my channel, I like to talk about what I consider to be the heart of writing, which is the psychology of the characters. So you will find all kinds of different topics that I like to dive into. For this video, this is actually the third video in a series I just recently started, which is essentially diagnosing character tropes. So in this series, I take popular character tropes and I kind of dive into the psychology behind it. So far, we've had a lot of fun, and if you guys have any suggestions for future tropes you want me to talk about, just let me know. For today, I thought we would tackle a very popular one, which is the rogue hero. So first and foremost, what is the rogue hero? As a general rule, you will find this one kind of cross-referenced with a lot of other tropes. But in general, a rogue hero is a protagonist who tries to do the right thing, but he may do not so right or moral things to get there. A lot of times they're very kind of scruffy around the edges. These are your Han Solos as a general rule. So, what is the psychology behind the rogue hero? Well, one thing that I have noticed in nearly 100% of cases is a history of either abandonment or trauma or both. And as a general rule, this dictates their kind of standoffish attitude. And to understand that, you kind of have to know a little bit about trauma. So I won't go super in depth because that is a very long topic for another day. But when someone is abandoned when they are young, it depends on how young they are. But as a general rule, when you're abandoned, it messes with what we call the hierarchy of needs. This was developed by Maslow years and years ago, and it's kind of up for debate whether or not all of it's true. I, in my experience, have found it to mostly be true, so I still kind of go by it. So basically, the idea is that our needs are mapped out in essentially a pyramid. The most vital at the bottom, the least vital at the top, and to reach essentially your ultimate being, your most enlightened self, you have to climb the tiers of the pyramid. So at the very, very bottom, we have the ultimate essentials: shelter, food, water. And that is all that's on the bottom. The second tier is where this abandonment issue comes in. And the second tier is safety and security, which is basically, do I feel safe? Do I feel like I'm gonna wake up and be okay the next morning? Do I feel like that if something bad is gonna happen, I can handle it? That kind of thing. And that's where abandonment kind of messes with you, because when we're born, we usually bond with a specific authority figure, parent, guardian, whatever you will call it. And the reason we bond with them is essentially we learn that they are going to tend to our needs. They are going to be there when we need them. They're going to be there to answer questions. They're going to be there to provide food, shelter, safety. They're going to protect us, all that necessary stuff. And when that security is suddenly taken away, you have a child who is put in a situation where they can't necessarily take care of themselves. They can't necessarily fulfill the role that a parent would fulfill because they're too young by society standards, and mentally they're too young. So the brain is very good at learning how to adapt. So in these kind of scenarios, we have what's called adultification of a child, which is where you have a child that suddenly matures very, very quickly. Not necessarily because they want to, but because they have to. So these are like, the 8, the 9-year-olds that, you talk to them, it sounds like they're like 15 or 16. And in the case of the rogue hero, this usually takes the form of them finding a way to put food in their belly, finding a way to make sure that they're going to have shelter, they're going to have warmth, whatever it is that they need to fulfill those hierarchy of needs. And the funny thing about morality is that it's not consistent. We like to think it's consistent, but it does alter, it does change. So, in this type of scenario, if you have someone who has a very strong moral basis, they have this belief that, everyone should have an equal chance, everyone should be paid well for their work, all that, those kind of things. If they're in a situation where they are kind of between a rock and a hard place in that they can't get legitimate work, but they still have to eat, then the morals don't go away, but they kind of shift. So it's like, okay, in an ideal situation, no, I don't want to steal food. No, I don't want to steal things to sell. But in this situation, it becomes down to, okay, I'm either going to have to steal the things I want, or I'm going to starve. And as much as we would like to think we would stick to our morals in every situation, survival usually wins out in that scenario. And that's usually what you see with these folks, is this is the character who, even though they may not have wanted to, grew up taking whatever jobs they could, being a smuggler, being a mercenary, stealing food, stealing whatever it is they need to do to get to where they need to go, to get to so that they can provide for themselves. And this is a very hard mental state to kind of wrench yourself out of after a while. Again, not because you don't want to, but because when our brain is in a survival mode, survival situation, it's very hard to switch that mode off when you've been in it for a while. Because, let's face it, these characters are not going to have the best life. They're going to be faced with adversity. They're going to be faced with people coming after them for, stealing or for manipulating them or whatever it is they had to do to survive. And the brain knows it. And it kind of comes down to, okay, do I want to go back to my morals, or do I want to make sure that I'm going to be alive tomorrow morning? Again, survival tends to win out. And so a lot of times what we see with the rogue hero is them getting in a situation where they finally can go back to their morals that they really want. Occasionally you'll have one where they kind of present it as they didn't really have any morals to begin with. I'm not a huge fan of that because I don't think that's very realistic. Because the way morality develops, it's actually very interesting because we go through levels of morality. We go through, this is wrong because mommy and daddy or whomever is in charge of me told me it's wrong. Then we go into, this is wrong because the law told me it's wrong, because the law is an authority that said guardian has told me about is above them. Okay, so the law says it's wrong, it has to be wrong. Then it goes into, it's wrong because I don't want to get in trouble. And that's kind of where the consequences come in, is if you tell a kid that they can't take candy from a candy store without paying for it, not only do you have the previous morality factors in play, but you also have, now they know that people that steal get arrested, they go to jail. That's a consequence that they don't want. And then eventually you get to what I like to call the more enlightened morality, which is where you kind of start making your own ideas about what makes something right, what makes something wrong. A very popular question that we ask is the pharmacist question, which is essentially a man has a very sick wife. She has a illness that does have a cure, but the cure is very expensive. The local pharmacy has the cure. The older man goes down there, discusses with them, tries to find a way that he can pay for it. The pharmacy refuses to sell it to him. So later that night, the old man breaks into the pharmacy and steals it and gives it to his wife. And then the question is, was he wrong? And that's where you kind of get the gray area coming in there, because legally, was he wrong? Yeah. Morally, was it right for the pharmacist to not work with him? But that's where it gets sticky. So that's where I think a lot of these rogue heroes get in their essential hero's journey, is they get to a point where they can be in that higher morality. They can focus on something larger than themselves, something bigger than themselves. And most of the time, how do we get this? We get this through the found family trope. Usually they come in contact with someone who they grow very attached to, or maybe it's an organization. But there's someone that they connect with. And this ties into something else that has to do with trauma and abandonment, and that is trust, or more accurately, lack thereof. You will see with a lot of these characters, they have a very difficult time trusting someone. And again, this is based off their past. In their past, they've had people usually that were dear to them that have either been killed or have left them, or any number of scenarios in between those two. So when that happens often enough, we put a wall up. We kind of try to protect ourselves emotionally by distancing ourselves. There's actually, I know there's a popular saying that trust is earned, not given. And while that's true to some degree, I think it is more accurate to say it is given, because essentially what trust is you're telling someone, I have no evidence to make me believe that you're going to do what you say you're going to do, but I'm going to give you my trust anyway. I'm going to believe that you're going to do what you're going to do anyway. And that gets more complex when you have someone who has a history of being essentially backstabbed, where they've had people leave, they've had people die, they've had people manipulate them. So in that case, not only are they having to give their trust again, but they're having to give it with evidence that says this person is most likely going to betray me. That is a very hard thing to do. So that is why a lot of the time at the very beginning of their journey, the rogue hero is very cantankerous, he's very cold, he's usually very distant, will probably be throwing insults at people. And that is a way of testing as well. It's kind of a way of saying, okay, I'm going to insult you. I'm not going to be kind to you. I want to see what you're going to do. Are you going to leave? So naturally, there is a lot more to trauma and things like this than I can go into in like a 15-minute video. But I think that kind of covers the basis of it, of what kind of makes up the rogue hero and why it seems to work best when we are introduced to them over a period of time. Because I think what kind of fails some people is they introduce a rogue hero, they want to have kind of the bad boy type of image, but then they also want them to bond with these new folks. And if you do it too quickly, it feels very unrealistic. If you do it over a course of, say, a book, or a course of several books or several movies, it makes a lot more sense. And I particularly like it when they throw in a scenario where the rogue hero will leave because he's trying to figure out what he wants, essentially. He knows that he likes this connectedness with this new group, but he also has that fear in the back of his mind as these people are going to go away like everybody else has. So essentially the rogue hero is a really good demonstration of how to build trust and how to build essentially connectedness with people. And I think that's one reason people love it so much, because we all have had, at least at some point in our life, a point where someone broke our trust. And so I think we can all relate to that. So when you introduce someone who has learned to overcome this pain, but is still able to reconnect with people, I think that's very encouraging to people. And that's one reason I think people love it. All right, guys, so that is the diagnosis of the rogue hero. Thank you guys for stopping in. And as always, if you have any suggestions or tropes you would like me to delve into, do let me know because I always love to take suggestions. And you can always follow me on social media. I have all the links below. And if you guys enjoy this type of content, please make sure to subscribe and you'll know whenever I put a new video up. Starting this week, I am on a much more stable schedule than I was before. I will be posting new videos on Thursdays and Sundays. So until next time, I hope you guys have a good one.